Hello, family. Enjoy this relaxing moment with Surly Tales. Remember to hit the like button, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. It means the world to us. Also, share this video with your friends and loved ones, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. Adanna Okafor walked through the glass doors of her penthouse in Lagos, her heels clicking softly against the Italian marble floors. The city skyline stretched before her, a mesmerizing mix of twinkling lights and restless energy. She sighed, sipping from a crystal glass of freshly squeezed mango juice. This was the life she had built with Obinna. A life of luxury, influence, and admiration. They were the picture of a perfect power couple. Him, a ruthless but charming billionaire, and her, the graceful but astute businesswoman standing by his side. Their mansion in Ikoyi was the envy of many, their charity foundations the pride of Nigeria's elite. The tabloids adored them. Lagos' most powerful couple, they called them. Women admired Adanna, not just for her beauty but for how she carried herself, elegant, kind, and intelligent. But perfection, as she would soon learn, was a fragile illusion. The first crack. It started with subtle changes. Obinna, who used to rush home every evening, now found excuses to stay late at work. His phone, once left carelessly on their bed, was now guarded like a state secret. At first, she ignored it. Their marriage had survived storms before. Being the wife of a billionaire required patience, and Adanna had learned the art of waiting. But one evening, the wait turned into doubt. She was in their bedroom when she saw his phone buzz. The message flashed briefly before disappearing. "Can't wait to see you tonight. I miss you already." Her stomach tightened. She stared at the message, heart pounding. The contact name was saved as Tariwa. The name meant nothing to her. Not yet. When Obinna walked in hours later, she was seated on the bed, holding his phone. He looked at her, his face betraying the briefest flicker of annoyance before settling into a smooth mask. "Why are you going through my phone?" he asked, his voice calm but edged with warning. "I wasn't," she replied, her own voice surprisingly steady. "It lit up and I saw the message." "Who is Tariwa?" His eyes darkened for a second before he shrugged. "A business associate." Adanna held his gaze, searching for the husband she once knew. "Business associates don't send messages like that. Are you accusing me of something?" He let out a short laugh, shaking his head. "I work late, and suddenly I'm cheating?" She wanted to believe him. She desperately wanted to believe that this was all in her head. But her instincts screamed otherwise. "Obinna," she whispered, "if there's something you need to tell me now." He kissed her forehead, an action that once made her feel safe. "There's nothing, my love. Stop overthinking." She nodded, forcing a smile. But deep inside, she knew. The cracks in their perfect life had begun to spread. The other woman, Tariwa Mensah, was everything a man like Obinna would find irresistible. Tall, caramel-skinned, and blessed with a face that could launch 1,000 endorsements. She was a rising star in the modeling industry, and more importantly, she knew exactly how to play her cards. Obinna had met her at an exclusive gala in Victoria Island. The attraction was instant. Tariwa had leaned in close, her perfume intoxicating, her laughter like music. She knew who he was. Everyone did. But unlike other women who fawned over his wealth, she played it differently, cool, slightly unattainable. And that was all it took. What started as casual flirtation quickly escalated into secret getaways, lavish gifts, and whispered promises. Tariwa was young, exciting, and most importantly, she made him feel alive in a way he hadn't in years. Adanna was stability, Tariwa was fire. Obinna convinced himself that he wasn't doing anything wrong. After all, men of his status weren't expected to be faithful. But deep down, he knew he was betraying the one person who had stood by him when he had nothing. And the worst part? He didn't care. The unraveling. The truth came crashing down one fateful evening. Adanna had hired a private investigator, something she never imagined she would do. But the late nights, the unexplained expenses, the scent of unfamiliar perfume on his shirts, she needed confirmation. The investigator didn't disappoint. She received the photos in an envelope. Pictures of Obinna and Tariwa, hand in hand at a luxury resort in Mauritius. Tariwa laughing as Obinna held her close. The final picture was the dagger to her heart, Obinna kissing Tariwa in a way that left no room for doubt. Adanna felt the air leave her lungs. Her hands shook as she gripped the pictures, bile rising in her throat. That night she waited. Obinna walked in at midnight, his tie loosened, smelling of expensive whiskey. She placed the pictures on the table between them. "Explain this." He barely glanced at them before exhaling. "Adanna, listen. Don't you dare insult me with a lie," she cut in, voice trembling with controlled fury. Obinna rubbed his temples. "I won't deny it. Yes, I'm with Tariwa. And yes, I love her." The words sliced through her like a blade. "You love her," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," he said, his tone firmer now. "And I want a divorce." The room spun. Divorce? After everything they had built? After all the sacrifices she had made? "You're leaving me for her?" she asked, disbelief coating her voice. Obinna met her gaze, unflinching. "Yes." She let out a shaky breath, willing herself not to cry. "After everything I've done for you? After building this empire with you?" He leaned forward, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. "Adanna, let's not rewrite history. You were But I built this empire. It was my vision, my decisions, my money." She felt the slap of his words more than if he had struck her. "I'll make sure you're taken care of," he continued. "You'll get a fair settlement, and you can move on with your life." Adanna laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. "Move on? You think you can just erase me like a bad investment? You'll be fine, Adanna. You're strong." She stared at him for a long moment before nodding. "You're right. I am strong." She turned and walked away, not looking back. But as she left, something inside her shifted. The pain was still raw, the betrayal unbearable. Yet beneath it all, a fire was igniting. Obinna had no idea. But he would soon learn. Adanna Okafor was not a woman to be discarded. The woman they underestimated. Adanna sat in the back seat of her black Mercedes, staring blankly out the tinted windows as the car wove through the chaotic streets of Lagos. The city moved in its usual rhythm, horns blaring, traders shouting, the vibrant energy of life pulsing around her. But inside she felt numb. It had been 2 weeks since Obinna left her. 2 weeks since she had walked out of their mansion, her dignity barely intact. She had moved into a private apartment in Lekki, away from the whispers of the elite, away from the pitying eyes of women who once envied her. She had lost everything, her home, her title as Mrs. Okafor, her standing in society. The divorce settlement had been insulting. A few properties here and there, but nothing close to the wealth they had built together. But if Obinna thought she would crumble, he didn't know her at all. Adanna was not a woman who wept over spilled milk. She was a woman who built her own dairy farm. And that was exactly what she intended to do. The hidden card. What Obinna had forgotten, because men like him often underestimated women, was that Adanna had been more than just his wife. She had been his silent partner, the woman behind the empire, the strategist behind his biggest deals. And she had secrets of her own. She sat at her new dining table, a cup of black coffee in her hand, as she reviewed the documents spread out before her. There was a business deal she had signed years ago, a hidden investment in a rising tech firm, one that Obinna had dismissed as a waste of time. She had secretly retained her shares, never adding his name. And now, that very company was on the brink of a billion-dollar expansion. A slow smile spread across her lips. She may have lost her husband, but she hadn't lost her mind. The man in the shadows. 2 days later, Adanna sat across from Chuka Nwosu, a man as mysterious as he was powerful. He was a billionaire in his own right, but he preferred to stay behind the scenes, pulling strings, making moves in the shadows. "You said you had a proposition for me," he said, his deep voice smooth yet commanding. Adanna leaned forward. "You're looking to expand into the fintech space. I have the perfect company for you." Chuka raised an eyebrow. "The one everyone's been buzzing about?" She nodded. "I have controlling shares." His expression shifted slightly. "That's unexpected." She took a sip of her wine, her confidence unwavering. Obinna didn't know. He never paid attention to the details. But I did. Chuka studied her, then leaned back in his chair. You're not the same woman I used to see at those charity galas? No, she said, her voice steely. I'm not. A slow smile spread across his face. I like this version of you. He extended his hand. Let's make history. And just like that, the tides began to turn. The rise begins. Within weeks, Adanna's name was back in business circles, but this time, not as Obinna Okafor's ex-wife. She was the woman leading one of the fastest-growing fintech companies in Africa. The media started taking notice. From billionaire's wife to business mogul, Adanna Okafor's unstoppable rise. The woman who refused to fall. How Adanna Okafor is reshaping the business world. The whispers turned to admiration. Obinna had expected her to disappear. Instead, she was everywhere. And then came the moment that shook everything. Her company announced a merger. With none other than Okafor Holdings. The company Obinna still controlled. He had no idea what was coming. The first confrontation. Obinna paced his office, the tension in his jaw visible as he read the news headline. Adanna Okafor joins forces with Nwosu Group in landmark merger with Okafor Holdings. He slammed the newspaper onto his desk. This is a joke, right? He barked at his assistant. Sir, the deal was negotiated directly with the board. You weren't consulted because, well, because what? Obinna growled. The assistant hesitated. Because Mrs. Okafor, Ms. Okafor, was the primary negotiator. Obinna's vision darkened. Adanna. She had blindsided him. He grabbed his phone and dialed her number. It rang twice before she picked up. Obinna, her voice was cool, unreadable. What the hell are you doing? He demanded. What does it look like? She replied smoothly. You think you can just waltz back in and take over my business? She laughed softly. Your business? Funny. Because as I recall, I was there when you built it. And now, I'm here to make it better. His fingers tightened around the phone. You think you've won, don't you? I don't think, Obinna, she said. I know. And with that, she ended the call. Obinna stared at his phone, rage boiling in his chest. He had underestimated her. But he wouldn't make that mistake again. The battle begins. The corporate war that followed became the most talked about business story in Nigeria. Obinna tried to push her out, but she was too strategic. He tried to turn the media against her, but the public admired her rise too much. And then the final blow came. Adanna, in a stunning boardroom move, secured the majority of shares in Okafor Holdings through silent investors. The next time she walked into Obinna's office, it was with legal documents in hand. You're out, Obinna, she said, placing them on his desk. He looked at the papers, then at her. You wouldn't? She met his gaze, unwavering. I already did. For the first time in his life, Obinna Okafor had lost. And the woman he had abandoned was the one who took everything from him. The birth of a legend. As Adanna stood in front of the press, announcing her takeover, she felt no hatred, no lingering heartbreak. This was not about revenge anymore. It was about power. She had fallen, but she had risen again. Like a phoenix from the ashes. And this time, she was unstoppable. The crumbling empire. Obinna Okafor had built an empire from the ground up. He had clawed his way to the top of Nigeria's business elite, stepping on anyone who got in his way. For years, he had been untouchable, until now. The headlines were brutal. Okafor Holdings faces leadership crisis after power shift. Ex-wife of billionaire takes over empire in unprecedented business coup. Adanna Okafor, the woman who beat the king at his own game. His investors were restless. His board was divided. His competitors smelled blood. For the first time in his life, Obinna felt something he hadn't felt in years: fear. He sat in his office, staring at the report in front of him. Profits were down, partnerships were crumbling, and the stock price of Okafor Holdings had taken a 15% hit since Adanna's takeover. And then there was Tariwa. She was no longer the sweet, seductive woman he had fallen for. She was a problem. The woman who was never in love. Tariwa Mensah had gotten exactly what she wanted. wealth, influence, and the status of being the woman who had stolen a billionaire from his wife. 4 months, she had played the perfect partner, attending high-end galas, posing for magazine covers, enjoying the spoils of Obinna's empire. But now, his empire was falling, and Tariwa had no interest in being attached to a sinking ship. She watched from their penthouse as Obinna ranted on the phone, trying to salvage his reputation. His face was tense, his voice laced with frustration. She sipped her expensive champagne, bored. "I don't know why you're stressing," she said lazily. "You're still rich, aren't you?" Obinna shot her a glare. "Do you even understand what's happening? Adanna is destroying me." Tariwa shrugged. "She's just better at this game than you are." His jaw tightened. "Excuse me? You underestimated her. That was your first mistake," she said, placing her glass down. "And now you're scrambling." Obinna's nostrils flared. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" She smirked. "A little." He stared at her, realization dawning. "You never loved me, did you?" Tariwa leaned forward, her expression amused. "Obinna, darling, you're rich. You're powerful. But love?" She let out a soft chuckle. "You were a stepping stone. Nothing more." His fists clenched. "I gave you everything." She tilted her head. "No, you gave me what you thought I wanted. But the moment you stopped being useful to me..." She trailed off, sipping her champagne again. Obinna's blood boiled. "You used me like you used Adanna?" Tariwa shot back, her eyes sharp. Silence. Then she stood up, stretched and walked toward the door. "Where are you going?" Obinna demanded. She smiled. "To find a real billionaire. One who isn't falling apart." And just like that, she was gone. The unexpected meeting. Obinna hadn't left his mansion in days. His business was in chaos, his pride shattered, and now, Tariwa had walked out without a second thought. He needed leverage. He needed a plan. But before he could strategize, he received an unexpected invitation. From Adanna. The email was simple. "Meet me at the Pearl Hotel. 7 p.m. Let's talk." He hesitated. Was this a trap? A move to humiliate him further? Or was this an opportunity to fix things? By 6:45 p.m., he was already at the hotel. By 6:55 p.m., he was seated in the private lounge, waiting. At exactly 7 p.m., Adanna walked in. She looked different. Not in a way that showed wealth. She had always been elegant, but in a way that exuded power. She wasn't the woman he had discarded. She was the woman who had beaten him. She took her seat, crossing her legs gracefully. "You came?" He forced a smirk. "Curiosity got the best of me." She nodded, signaling the waiter for a drink. "So tell me, Obinna, how does it feel?" "How does what feel?" he asked stiffly. "To lose." His jaw tightened. "This isn't over." She chuckled. "It is, actually." He leaned forward. "Why did you call me here, Adanna? To gloat?" She shook her head. "Oh. To give you a chance?" He frowned. "A chance for what?" She placed a document in front of him. "A way out." Obinna picked up the paper and scanned it. His breath caught in his throat. It was an offer. A buyout. Adanna was offering to buy out the remainder of his shares in Okafor Holdings, effectively removing him completely. "If you sign this," she said, "you walk away with your dignity. You take the money, start over, and disappear quietly." Obinna's fingers clenched around the document. "And if I refuse?" Her smile didn't waver. "Then I will crush you. Publicly. Mercilessly." The air between them grew thick with tension. "You wouldn't," he whispered. "I would," she said calmly. "And you know it." Obinna stared at her, his mind racing. He had two choices: take the deal and leave with his head held high, or fight her and risk losing everything. He swallowed hard. "Give me time to think." "You have 48 hours, she said, standing up. "After that, I won't be so generous." She walked away without looking back. And for the first time in his life, Obinna Okafor knew he had been truly defeated. The final betrayal. The next day, as Obinna debated his decision, he received a call from his bank. Something was wrong. His personal accounts had been drained. Tens of millions. His heart pounded. "Who did this?" he demanded. The banker hesitated. Sir, the transfers were made by Miss Tariwa Mensah. Obinna's blood ran cold. She had cleaned him out. Everything he had given her, the investments, the offshore accounts, the properties, she had taken everything. He dropped the phone, his head spinning. Tariwa had destroyed him. Adanna had outmaneuvered him. And now, for the first time since he became a billionaire, Obinna Okafor was broke. The taste of karma. Adanna sat in her office, sipping a glass of red wine as she watched the news. The headline flashed across the screen. Obinna Okafor financially ruined, ex-fiancé accused of theft. She smiled to herself. Poetic justice. Her phone buzzed. It was Chuka. It's done, he said simply. She exhaled. Good. Obinna had played his games. Now, she was the one writing the rules. And she was just getting started. The fallen king. Obinna sat alone in the dimly lit bar, nursing a glass of whiskey that had long lost its warmth. The once mighty billionaire, the man whose name commanded fear and respect in the business world, was now nothing more than a whispered cautionary tale. Everything had crumbled. Adanna had taken his empire. Tariwa had taken his money. And now he had nothing. The news had spread like wildfire. Investors had abandoned him, creditors were circling like vultures, and the once loyal employees of Okafor Holdings barely acknowledged his existence. He had been erased. His phone buzzed, breaking the silence. Unknown number. He hesitated before answering. Who is this? A deep, calm voice responded. Someone who has been watching your downfall with great interest? Obinna's grip on the glass tightened. I'm not in the mood for games. The voice chuckled. Oh, this isn't a game. It's an opportunity. Obinna straightened. I'm listening. Meet me tomorrow at the Grand Orchid Hotel. 8 p.m. We have unfinished business. The call ended before he could ask any questions. He stared at the phone, his mind racing. Who was this? And what did they want? For the first time in weeks, hope flickered. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end. The woman behind the curtain. Adanna sat across from Chuka Nwosu in a private lounge, the city lights of Lagos stretching beneath them like a sea of possibilities. You're sure he took the bait? She asked, swirling the wine in her glass. Chuka smirked. He'll come. Desperation makes men predictable. Adanna nodded. Good. The plan was in motion. She had orchestrated everything, the financial ruin, the strategic business moves, even Tariwa's betrayal. Because unlike Obinna, she didn't react to betrayal. She calculated it. And she had been calculating this for years. You think he'll try to fight back? Chuka asked, studying her. Adanna met his gaze, her expression unreadable. Oh. He'll think he has a chance to rebuild. She leaned forward, her voice calm yet lethal. And that's when we'll finish him. The meeting that changed everything. Obinna arrived at the Grand Orchid Hotel at exactly 8 p.m. The lobby was filled with the city's elite, but for the first time in his life, no one turned to greet him. He was invisible. A hostess led him to a private suite on the top floor. The door was slightly ajar. He pushed it open and froze. Seated across the room, in an elegant black dress, sipping a glass of wine with effortless grace, was Adanna. His chest tightened. She smiled. Hello, Obinna. He stepped inside, his pulse quickening. You set me up. She tilted her head. Did I? You knew Tariwa would betray me. You planned all of this? Adanna leaned back, her gaze unwavering. What exactly did I do, Obinna? Did I force you to cheat? Did I tell you to trust a woman you barely knew? Did I make you destroy your own legacy? He clenched his fists. You ruined me. She laughed softly. No, darling. You ruined yourself. I just made sure the world saw it happen. Obinna's jaw tightened. Why? Adanna set her glass down and leaned forward. Because you took everything from me, she said, her voice calm yet charged with emotion. My dignity. Trust. My love. And you thought I would just disappear? Obinna exhaled sharply. So this was revenge? No, she said simply. This was justice. He stared at her, searching for the woman he once knew. She wasn't there anymore. In her place was someone stronger. Someone unstoppable. And for the first time since he left her, he felt fear. The revelation that changed everything. Obinna stood, pacing. So what now? You gloat while I suffer? Adanna shook her head. Oh. I called you here to give you a choice. She slid a folder across the table. He hesitated before picking it up. As he flipped through the pages, his breath caught. It was a financial audit. One that traced embezzlement, millions of dollars funneled into offshore accounts. Obinna frowned. What is this? Adanna smirked. It's proof that Tariwa didn't just steal from you. She was working with your competitors. Obinna's heart pounded. That's impossible. Is it? She asked, tilting her head. You never wondered how she knew exactly where to hit you? How she knew which accounts to drain? Which clients to target? His mind reeled. Tariwa hadn't just left him. She had destroyed him. And now, the proof was right in front of him. He looked up at Adanna. Why are you showing me this? Her expression was unreadable. Because I want you to know what it feels like to have someone play you like a pawn. He exhaled, gripping the folder. So what now? Adanna smiled, standing up. You have two choices, Obinna. You can disappear quietly, take what little dignity you have left and move on. She walked to the door before turning back. Or, she said, her voice deadly calm, you can fight back and watch me bury you completely. Obinna clenched his jaw. He had lost the battle. But the war wasn't over. Not yet. And as Adanna walked away, he made a silent vow. If she wanted a fight, she was going to get one. The desperation of a broken man. Obinna sat in his now modest apartment in Lekki, staring at the city lights through the window. The air conditioning buzzed softly, but the room still felt suffocating. He had gone from owning the grandest estates in Lagos to this, an upscale, but far from luxurious, residence. He gritted his teeth. Adanna had played him. Tariwa had betrayed him. His empire was gone. His name was in ruins. But he refused to be forgotten. He would not be erased. A sharp knock on the door broke his thoughts. He wasn't expecting visitors. He opened it cautiously. Standing before him, looking as powerful as ever, was Chuka Nwosu. Obinna narrowed his eyes. What do you want? Chuka smirked. To discuss an opportunity. Obinna let out a dry laugh. Last time I checked, you were backing Adanna. Why the sudden interest in me? Chuka stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. Because I admire survivors. And right now, you have two choices, Obinna. Fade into obscurity, or get back in the game. Obinna crossed his arms. And why would you help me? Chuka's expression darkened. Because Adanna has become more powerful than I expected. And powerful people need to be controlled. Obinna's eyes flashed with interest. For the first time in weeks, he felt hope. The trap is set. Adanna sat in her corner office, flipping through reports. Her empire was thriving. She had secured government contracts, expanded into West Africa, and even begun plans for a fintech revolution in Nigeria. Everything was going perfectly. Until a familiar name appeared in the latest business news. Obinna Okafor and Chuka Nwosu joined forces to launch new investment firm. Her heart stopped for a moment. She quickly skimmed the article. The company was backed by some of the most powerful investors in the country. And the mission? To compete directly with her newly built financial empire. Adanna exhaled, closing the report. Obinna wasn't backing down. He was coming for her. And she was ready. The boardroom battle. The first direct clash happened at a major investor summit in Abuja. Adanna walked into the venue, dressed in a power suit that commanded attention. Cameras flashed as she strode in confidently, but her eyes were already scanning the room for one person. She found him near the VIP section. Obinna stood, shaking hands with dignitaries, his confidence restored. Beside him was Chuka, whispering into his ear like a kingmaker preparing his pawn. Adanna walked straight to them, her presence immediately shifting the atmosphere. Obinna, she said coolly. He turned, flashing a smile. Adanna. I was wondering when we'd cross paths again. She crossed her arms. Didn't take you long to crawl back, did it? He chuckled. You didn't expect me to stay down forever, did you? Chuka, always the strategist, stepped forward. This isn't personal, Adanna. It's just business. She smirked. It's always personal when I'm involved. Obinna met her gaze. Then may the best empire win. She didn't blink. It already has. And with that, she walked away, leaving them to wonder just how much she knew. The fatal mistake. Obinna and Chuka's company gained momentum quickly. They poached some of Adanna's top executives. They secured a few high-profile deals. The media painted it as the great comeback of a fallen king. For a moment, it looked like Obinna had truly returned. But there was one fatal flaw. They had underestimated Adanna. What Obinna didn't know was that Adanna had been 3 steps ahead the entire time. She had planted insiders in his company. She had leaked false investment opportunities, tricking him into wasting millions. She had even made sure that the government contracts he was chasing were already secured under her name. And then came the final blow. A leaked report surfaced, exposing massive financial mismanagement in Obinna's new firm. The stock plummeted. Investors pulled out. Chuka abandoned ship. And just like that, Obinna was ruined. The last begging. Obinna sat in his office, staring at the destruction of his second chance. He had fought. He had clawed his way back. But in the end, he had lost again. And there was only one person left to turn to. Adanna. He called her. To his surprise, she answered. Adanna, he breathed. Silence. Then her voice, calm, but unforgiving. What do you want, Obinna? He swallowed hard. A meeting. Please. Another pause. Then finally, fine. One last meeting. And then the line went dead. The final conversation. They met at a high-end restaurant, the same place Obinna had taken Tariwa when he first betrayed Adanna. She sat across from him, unmoved by the man who once controlled her world. He exhaled. You've won. She tilted her head. I know. His throat tightened. I don't have anything left, Adanna. Not even my pride. She leaned forward. And yet, you still found the courage to call me. His jaw clenched. Because I need your help. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You don't need my help, Obinna. You need a miracle. His hands trembled slightly. Please. She studied him for a long moment before finally speaking. I'll make you an offer, she said. His eyes lit up with hope. She smirked. Walk away. Leave Lagos. Leave business. Leave everything behind. His breath caught. You're asking me to disappear? She nodded. If you stay, I will destroy you. Completely. There will be no third chances. He swallowed hard. And if I leave? You get to keep whatever dignity you have left. The weight of her words crushed him. He knew she meant it. He had no choice. Obinna Okafor, once the king of Lagos, was officially done. He stood, exhaling sharply. Goodbye, Adanna. She didn't reply. He turned and walked away. And with every step, he felt the last remnants of his former life fade. He was no longer the billionaire. No longer the tycoon. No longer the man who ruled Lagos. And Adanna? She had taken his throne. And she had no intention of giving it back. The throne is hers. Adanna stood on the rooftop of her Lagos headquarters, overlooking the sprawling city that had witnessed her downfall and her rise. The air was thick with the scent of the night, the hum of distant traffic blending with the occasional honk of impatient drivers. She had done it. She had not only survived Obinna's betrayal, she had thrived. Her name was no longer tied to his. She was not just Obinna Okafor's ex-wife. She was Adanna Okafor, the most powerful businesswoman in Nigeria. The boardroom battles were over. The empire was hers. And now, the real game was about to begin. As she sipped her glass of red wine, her phone vibrated. She glanced at the screen. Chuka Nwosu. She smirked before answering. To what do I owe this call, Chuka? His deep voice came through smoothly. I just wanted to congratulate you. You played the game better than anyone expected. Adanna chuckled. You expected me to lose? Not lose, he admitted. But I didn't think you'd dismantle Obinna so effortlessly. She sipped her wine. Men always underestimate women. It's their greatest weakness. Chuka laughed. And what's yours? Her eyes darkened slightly. I haven't found one yet. Silence stretched between them before Chuka spoke again. So what's next, Adanna? You have everything now. The power, the influence. What do you want? She turned, staring at the vast city below her. Everything, Chuka. And she meant it. Obinna's last goodbye. Miles away, in a small private airport on the outskirts of Lagos, Obinna Okafor boarded a flight. He had no destination, just a one-way ticket out of Nigeria. The past few months had destroyed everything he had built. He had nothing left in Lagos but ghosts. As he sat in the private cabin, staring blankly at the empty seat across from him, he thought about the woman he had underestimated. Adanna had not only survived without him, she had flourished. And now, she ruled everything he once owned. For the first time, he respected her. Not as an ex-wife. Not as a woman he had discarded. But as the queen who had outplayed the king. As the engines roared and the plane ascended into the dark sky, Obinna took one last look at Lagos through the window. It was no longer his city. It was hers. A woman's throne. Adanna entered a gala event, dressed in a flowing emerald gown that hugged her curves perfectly. Cameras flashed as she stepped onto the red carpet, reporters scrambling to get a statement. Ms. Okafor. Ms. Okafor, a journalist called out. With Okafor Holdings now under your full control, what's your next move? Adanna smiled, pausing for a moment before answering. My next move? She glanced around the room, her presence commanding attention. To remind the world that a woman doesn't need to stand behind a man to be powerful. The crowd murmured in admiration. She walked into the gala with her head held high, knowing that tonight, and every night after, the world would remember her name. And for the first time in her life, she was exactly where she was meant to be. At the top. With no one above her. And no one strong enough to bring her down. The end. If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your support. See you soon.